So balanced effort. Before we do that, we'll just have a very quick recap over the last few weeks. So to start off with, we looked at Metta, and just as a mother who has an only son would protect her own son with a life, so should we cultivate the boundless mind towards all living beings. So the Metta Sutta. Then we've also looked at focus and breath, which I'm going to explore a bit more tonight. So in the first part of focus and breath, we looked at the importance of developing breadth of awareness, how at the start of a meditation, it's important we have a phase of settling in. The main part of it is, the session is then the focus, which this course is the Mettā Bhavana. And then a period of sitting on at the end, absorbing our breath, which represents spiritual receptivity. So at the start of the meditation, we want to develop an awareness of body, emotions, and thoughts. So the whole meditation takes place within our breadth of awareness. Okay, and then last week, we were looking at working in access concentration. And we were particularly looking at sinking and drifting, where drifting we had too much energy, was wordy, and we can work with that by adjusting our posture, say tucking the chin in, quieting phrases if we use the phrases, have the image that we're using, if we use an image at a distance, and keep re-establishing our breadth of awareness. And if we're sinking, we have too little energy, and for me it tends to be a little bit visual, so you may want to open your eyes, lengthen the posture, lift the head up a little bit. If you're doing phrases, make the phrases louder and brighten up images if you're using images. So this is working in lower access concentration. So remember last week we talked about stuff, and as we get more focus, we rise up above stuff. And ideally between sinking and drifting, we want to find that balance point, which is emphasized by the bird. So you almost want to get that point of balance between the wings, and then you can get the uplift to work higher up in access concentration. We'll be looking how to do that in, I think, a couple of weeks' time. So today we're going to look at balanced effort. Okay, thank you. In a way, this is following on both from our first week of focus and breath. So if you missed that one, you may want to go back to that. It should be available online or to download, and also following on to a certain extent working in access concentration, where we're looking at balancing energy. So in my mind, when we're talking about effort, two questions arise. How much effort is too much, and how much effort is too little? So again, we want to find a balance point between our efforts. So we don't want to be too forceful within our practice, but we don't want to be too slack. So the Buddha in the Pali Canon once talked about the amount of effort in relationship to a lute. And I think the person you're speaking to used to play the lute. And he kind of said, well, if you have too much tension in the spring, in the anyway, you know what I mean, thing that makes the sound. If you have too much tension, then string, it's a bit sharp. If you have too little tension, it's a bit flat. Um, so you want to find the balance point. So if you like, we want to be able to tune our effort to the string of a lute and just find that sweet spot, which is a proper note. We can also think of uh, the image of a bow. So if we've got a bow and arrow, if there's too much tension in the bowstring, we won't be able to pull it, and there won't be enough energy in the bowstring to fire the arrow. Likewise, if we have too little tension in the string, we're just going to pull it back and it's just going to flop down. So again, it's about finding like that sweet spot. So we need to play around with that. So in some ways, this follows on if we're in access concentration and we're working with sinking and drifting. If we're drifting, then we've probably got a little bit too much energy, and you could say we may want to take our effort in terms of the practice down and just dampen things down ever so slightly. If we're drifting, then we probably need some more engagement with the practice. Maybe remembering our resolve, why we're practicing the practice that we're doing. And obviously changing the posture as well. So more open posture is going to be more energetic. A more closed posture is going to be less energetic. So again, we're finding the amount of effort we want to put into the focus. Not sure if that answers the question, how much effort is too much and too little. I think in our culture, we can be very willful, particularly when it comes to the spiritual life. I sometimes wonder whether we can get into a view that we want to become awakened, and the way we do this is through willpower and almost do what I'd call a smash and grab on the transcendental. That basically you've got so much effort, you've got your JCB, and you're driving it in towards a cash point to pull the cash point out. I sometimes think we kind of try that sort of effort in the spiritual life for the transcendental. We'll try to break down the walls of ignorance with a sledgehammer. Don't think it quite works that way. So sometimes we just need to relax. And we need to, within our system of practice, thinking about spiritual receptivity a little bit more, which in a way is an antidote to willfulness. There's a wonderful story in the life of the Buddha, where he's practiced under various teachers and achieved the same results as they have, but he still doesn't feel quite like he's free. He hasn't achieved the goal that he set out, which was to break the bonds of suffering. And as he sat down under the Bodhi tree, there's two different aspects going on. He makes the vow to himself that he's not going to get up from that spot until he attains awakening. So in a way, that's quite willful. At the same time, he's also remembered a time when he was in his youth, watching maybe a ceremonial ploughing match or something under what's referred to as the rose apple tree. And he remembered that time. And at that time, there was a natural absorption in the scene in front of him, which was very receptive. So at the time of the Buddha's awakening, you have both this strong will to succeed, to break through, and also this kind of openness and spiritual receptivity. So in a way, he's maybe, you've got two aspects there in terms of how much effort we want. I do sometimes wonder in our spiritual life, whether we make enough effort. And I think in our spiritual lives in general, this is something that we need to play around with. And in meditation tonight, we'll play around with effort. Remember the great thing about play. Stiranaga touched on this a few weeks ago. You just kind of play. The great thing about play is there's no right or wrong. When children play, it's just like they play, they explore things, they work out, they learn quite a lot through play. And play isn't about judgment. So if we do something in our spiritual lives and it doesn't work, then we've learned something, which is great. If we do something and it does work, then that's great as well. Same more specifically in meditation. But I do wonder whether we need to make a little bit more effort in meditation. There's a couple of things from the Tibetan tradition spring to mind. Within the Triratna Buddhist community, we tend to take an approach based on the Theravadan tradition and their Abhidharma, their kind of lists of lists. The Tibetans tend to use a Savastivada Abhidharma, which is a different list of lists. So how they work is slightly different. And one of the things when they're wanting to develop concentration, when they're wanting to develop their samatha practices, such as mindfulness and metta, is the first stage is what they call forceful engagement. And in one of the texts, it says, when you start meditating, you want to do 20 breaths with your full attention. And then you should get a little bit of concentration forming. And if not, then you should probably go away and do puja or make offerings or something. I don't think we need to take that too literally in terms of our own practice. But I know some people, myself, from time to time, do the 20 breaths. And it does seem to work. You just do them with full attention at the start of a practice. And then it just kind of makes the mind a little bit more malleable. And then you go on to the main part of the practice. So for some people, you may see that almost as a part of the settling in process. Once we become aware of our body, our emotions, and our thoughts, particularly if we're doing mindfulness of breathing. Something we can play with if it sounds appealing. If it doesn't, then don't. It may be helpful, it may not. Again, from the Tibetan tradition, slightly more, I was going to say extreme, slightly more effortful, is the idea that you don't move in meditation. You train yourself not to move. And there's a part where they say, let the free waters flow. So you're meditating, and if you have saliva, you don't swallow it, you just kind of let it saliva out of your mouth. If you've got a blocked nose and phlegm, the phlegm runs. Sometimes some of the Tibetan traditions meditate with their eyes open. You've got your eyes open and your eyes water, then you let that flow. So that's a very kind of effortful practice or approach to meditation. I'm not necessarily saying that's what we should do, but it just raises the question, how much effort do we need to focus in meditation? We don't want to be willful. We don't want to be there going, make all beings be well, make all beings be happy, and a kind of scrunched up face and shoulders round here, and why aren't they happy? Because you're so tense. There has to be that element of relaxation within our practice. So it's just kind of getting us to thinking about how much effort we make. And some of that will depend on your personality type. I think inherently I'm quite lazy, so I sometimes actually probably need to make more effort. Some people are probably quite willful, in which case they need to make less effort. And part of the process of meditation is understanding our tendencies. But whatever we do with effort, I think the whole aspect of focus and breadth is really helpful, and alternating between them. So we've got one more slide and then we'll do some meditation. So we're familiar with the idea of the focus takes part in the breadth of awareness. So if we move on one slide, there we go. So we've got focus and breadth going through midline. So if we're tending to be more gentle in terms of the amount of effort we have with our focus, then we probably need less breadth of awareness. So quite often when I'm, say, leading a meditation, in terms of my own practice, between stages, I will kind of go, okay, let's just broaden my awareness into my breadth of awareness and then go on to the next stage. But if I'm taking more effort in terms of my focus, then I need to spend much more time in the breadth of awareness. So in the meditation tonight, we're going to lead it similar to last week, particularly if that wasn't recorded last week. But in the last stage, we're just going to focus a bit more on alternating focus and breadth. So we're going to make more effort in terms of developing our loving kindness, responding with loving kindness. And we're going to see what over focus feels like, and then balance that with breadth. And then we just want to find a sweet spot again between focus and breadth. And quite often, if we're doing much more intense focus, we may be just doing it for 2 or 3 breaths. We may just be doing it if we use phrases, some of the traditional ones, some of the ones Chandra Prabha mentioned in terms of the 5 positive precepts. We may just say 1 or 2 of those phrases and then go into the breadth of awareness. So we can play around with this and see what happens. For some people it'll work, some people it won't. But it's all about playing. It's about learning what works for you. So that's the practice. So thank you, Stiranaga, for the slides.